Our new, oh goodness, our new parent liaison. She is just started last week. So we are thrilled that we have a parent liaison now. We have been without for several months. And so, Joanna, I'm going to let you share a little bit about yourself. And I just really appreciate her support this evening. So go ahead, Johanna, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I am very happy to be here as the parent liaison. I have lots of experience working with parents, and I am a parent myself. So I worked with Beginnings for Parents of Children who are deaf or hard of hearing for 10 years as a parent educator, supporting parents from early intervention to transition to adulthood, and through all the processes along the way. So I'm just happy to be here and looking forward to supporting parents and helping to facilitate better communication across the board.
You ready?
Thank you. And I think there's already, I see that there is that Q&A and Lisa, we will be recording this webinar. So I just wanted to go ahead. Maybe you already answered that.
We are
But
recording
I
right
answered it.
now. Thank you.
If you want to go ahead and go through the slide, next slide.
Well,
So as we're getting ready to get started, I do want to kind of emphasize what Karen had emphasized with the questions. I am going to have certain stop points for us to ask for the group to ask specific questions to the topic. However, any questions that may be specific to your child, to a situation you're dealing with within your school district, or a situation you're advocating for, there are means to ask those questions or to receive technical assistance or support with that. However, this evening is not that, but I do have phone numbers and people that you can call and seek out that assistance towards the end. So we'll move forward. And so if those questions do come up, we will direct you in the correct place that you can ask those questions, possibly tomorrow or sometime later this week. So when we're thinking about starting at the level of when I was thinking about this webinar and prior to when there's not even a dispute, right? And thinking about developing trust is probably one of the most effective ways in dealing with a dispute when it happens, and developing relationships with your professional people who are dealing with your children or a student before it ever happens. So you want to know those key members of your IEP team. You want to know the people who are teaching your children. You want to develop professional working relationships with the providers, the school administrators, because as we all know, relationships, when they're good, they're great. But when something comes up, it's easier to deal with a disagreement with somebody you have a relationship with and that you trust than somebody that you don't. So, when I was thinking, how should we start this kind of webinar off? We want to start from a place of when there isn't a dispute. And so having that effective communication that's open, building those relationships at the beginning of that school year, and also sharing with people who may not know the children or the students information about hopes and dreams for your child or for a student, as well as the desired outcomes. So they get to know the students, gets to know your child when you start the school year off. If you can go back one,
sorry.
it's okay.
There we
So
go.
it's all right. So prior to the IEP meeting, so you're getting ready to go to that IEP meeting. And I'm thinking as a parent, what are you preparing for? And if you're an IEP team member, what are you preparing for? And this could apply to you as a case manager. You want to review the current IEP and the proposed IEP. You want to have data to look at As a parent, you may have data that you want the team to look at that you may bring to the table. You might want to ask the teacher, here, I want to share this with you so they have it, or the case manager. As a parent, you may have points of concerns that you want the team to consider, but when you're doing that list, you want to be very concise. Because remember, there's going to be a set amount of time the team is going to meet. So everybody wants to keep things concise. You have a purpose. So when you're getting an invitation to an IEP meeting, it is going to say the purpose of that IEP meeting. And I think it's really important when you go to the IEP meeting, everybody is on the same page. We know what the purpose of the meeting is. We're not going in saying we want the reeval, we want to review the IEP, we want to develop a BIP, start asking for things that were not part of that invitation because people aren't going to be expecting that. If you have something else you might want to consider, you need to make sure that the case manager is aware of that so that the team can be prepared to discuss that. If, as a parent, you are concerned about going to the meeting by yourself, you always have a right to bring a friend or a family member. However, we always encourage families and parents to inform case managers or the LEA rep prior to the meeting, so that they know that somebody else is coming and they know who's going to be in attendance. It is in vice versa that we encourage case managers and LEA reps to inform parents if there's going to be somebody at the meeting that the parent is not expecting. So if you're going to invite, if it is going to be a contentious meeting, the parent should know that possibly an attorney is coming to the meeting. It shouldn't be unexpected that an attorney is going to show up or somebody's going to show up that the parent's not expecting. And as a parent, that the school should know that you may be bringing someone as well. It all comes back to that relationship, and building that relationship really helps. So y'all all know we might have a disagreement, but we respect each other enough to keep those open lines of communication when there is a disagreement. So during that meeting, you always want to stay on focus, remember the purpose of that meeting. And when we'll talk about a facilitated IEP meeting later, but what we always talk about, what one of the benefits of a facilitated IEP meeting is really staying focused on the student, not on the teacher that, a parent may be upset at, or on as an LEA rep, or a teacher may be upset with the parent. Staying focused on the student, staying present at the child's, the data that is the existing data, not discussing possible past issues, but really what is going on with the child at the time. And again, being respectful of each other's input and time. Usually teams are going to set a time for the meeting. So remember that you're staying on topic, you're staying focused on the child and trying to get to the end goal. What's the purpose of the meeting? Is it to review and revise the IEP? Your end goal would be to get through that process. And if necessary, take those breaks. There's nothing wrong asking for a break if you need the break. Or if the meeting is going to end up, y'all need to stop, the team needs to stop. There's nothing wrong with stopping and asking to reconvene at a later date if emotions are getting too high. Because the end goal is to achieve whatever the purpose of the meeting is. And if that cannot happen in that environment where the tensions are high, then definitely stop the meeting so that the team can reconvene. And we do have processes at DPI that can help get those goals achieved if necessary.
Oh, this is a break point for questions, right? We have a specific question, Lee, about time and how much time can be allotted for a meeting, and is there anything in law or policy related to time, or is it just something that IEP teams work out among themselves?
That's a great question. It is something, there is nothing specific like an amount, but what is reasonable, such as if you're going to be conducting a reevaluation or an initial evaluation, what is reasonable for you to get through a review of existing data? How much data is there to review? You've really got to think that through. What kind of meeting? It's really individualized. Um, it should be something that the team talks with the parent about, but there also has to be consideration from the consideration of the teacher's time, the LEA rep's time, because again, they're being pulled from classrooms. So, you've got to think of that as well. What is reasonable to get through and a reevaluation? At times it may take 4 hours. At times it may take 1 hour to get through a review and revision of an IEP. So you've got to work together on that. And I think, it's really important for everybody to be, to think of the other IEP team members as well. And what is reasonable and how much data do we need to go through? And that's where you have to think of that pre-planning. How much work, what can we do ahead of time to plan for this meeting as a parent, as a case manager, as a LEA rep, as the EC teacher, as a general ed teacher, as somebody who may be an evaluator? Should I go over a report with a parent beforehand so we're not sitting there going through the whole entire report and then the parent's going to have questions? So it really is individualized, but it's important to pre-plan for that.
Right, any other questions before we move to the next section of the presentation? I don't see anything so far. We'll give people one quick moment to type here. All right, I think we're good. Move along.
So when we think about dispute resolution processes, I'm going to talk about the local level. And when I mean about the local level, so you've gone to this IEP meeting, you're not in agreement, you may have even met again, still not getting it resolved. Who can you contact? So local level is at your school district level or even at your school level. So at your school level, you would always want to start with your child's teacher or case manager. If you're not, even if it's a general ed teacher, you always want to start there, right? And see if you can resolve it with that person, because again, your child's going to be in that classroom probably all year. So you want to try to resolve it with them. And if you can't, then you would want to meet with the school administrator. If you can meet with them, or if necessary, give them a call. In special ed, we always say put all your concerns in writing, communicate in writing, therefore you have a record of that. And if it's a special ed issue, request that IEP meeting again if it needs to be addressed through the IEP process. Always request an IEP meeting and do it through a written request. So therefore, input the written request to the EC teacher, your case manager, and the LEA rep. That's very important. That way you have a record of it and you can go follow back up. I will say in my new role as a section chief, I have looked over several emails, and thankfully people forward that email to me and say, hey, did you overlook this? I made this request. And I'm like, yes, I did. I'm sorry. So it's good to have that. That way you can always forward it again and say, I made this request a week ago, just following up. And so that way you have it in writing. If you still are not getting some type of resolve to your concerns, I would go to your central office level, and usually that's a contact with your EC director. Now at bigger districts, they may have some other person you would contact before reaching out to the EC director, such as a compliance specialist. They may even have a parent liaison or an assistant director, and that information usually can be found on a website, or you can even ask your case manager or a school principal. They may be able to direct you to the person you would contact first at the central office level. Going from, you have a dispute straight to the superintendent usually does not, number one, it doesn't help the relationship at the school level. And normally it doesn't get the answer, it doesn't usually get the dispute resolved. The people who can resolve the dispute usually starts with the school level. So we always, recommend starting there and then going up to the central office and starting with the EC department.
What, before we shift, is there a time frame for emails to be responded to when you're
That's
doing
that's
this?
a local decision. Um, that's really up to the local district, that's really up to how the local district trains their teachers or their staff, with considering probably the amount of emails that are received. I don't know what would be reasonable within a school. I know with us, we do our best to get back, in a certain amount of days, but sometimes I would imagine in a school district, they would need, some time to respond, but that would be something you would have to ask your local school district if there was a policy or practice that they have in place for when, teachers are expected to respond to parents. But there's not a policy for that at the state level or through the IDEA or NC policies. I will say that if you were to request an IEP meeting, there would need to be some type of response within a reasonable time. That's usually reasonable time.
All right, we've got another question about kind of this issue of who to contact.
Okay.
If the team says something that you're, and assume this is as a parent, want for the child, and an outside provider says is needed, and the district says they don't offer that, do you still contact the district, or would you go above the district? I guess that would mean to the state next.
So, okay, I can read that. If your team says something that you want for your child.
Maybe we need just a little bit more information about that's
Yeah, that's
not offered. Maybe it's the part about something's not being offered. If the person that put that in, if you can add a little bit more, we'll try to get a little more information for you.
Yeah, and I'll chime in while we're trying to get that additional information. I think the other thing that can cause confusion is that outside providers are typically following a clinical or a medical model. And IEP teams are following the educational model. And so we have a lot of kids out there that are eligible for outside services. Maybe it's speech, maybe it's OT, maybe it's all the above. That maybe when they get to the IEP team meetings are not eligible for services because there's a different set of rules and a different set of factors. I think, as far as if it's something that the IEP team determines that a student needs, they reach consensus and they say that the student needs it, then the district has to provide it. That's part of FAPE, free appropriate public education. Where these arguments usually get stuck is on what's appropriate. And it's very conflicting for parents. It's like, I've got this trusted source that is doing all these things for my kids, and they say he or she needs this, and you guys are saying you're not. And oftentimes the district might be saying, we're not saying he doesn't need that. We're saying we can meet that need with what we have here, X, Y, and Z. So it really, these are the kinds of things that was like, we need all the details, and we don't want all the details here in this public space, but here's some more context. No problem. It's a one-on-one aid. Our child's neuropsychologist exam says she needs a one-on-one aid for all general classroom time. Our district says it's not something our district does unless the child needs it to physically access the curriculum. But our team is complaining now about how she doesn't work independently.
So that's one of those questions again that is specific to your child. And so it would be one of those questions that I can direct you to someone to call. You could even call someone at our office that would be happy to talk through that with you. But again, this webinar is not one of those that we're going to answer individual, like we have really time to answer individual questions. So if you can hold that, I'm going to give you a list of people you can call and their direct numbers. You can call us tomorrow. And matter of fact, you can call me. You can even call Joanna tomorrow, and one of us will be glad to talk through that with you if that's okay.
I guess the more general principle might be, tell me if I'm right, Lee, that if a family or another family in a similar situation has contacted their exceptional children's director, and that person has said, we don't do that, or we don't only do that in these circumstances, the next step would be where we're heading now, which is to the state context, correct?
Yes, and if they had said it was an IEP team decision, the team decided this and the parent doesn't agree, then there are steps, and that would be this next step.
Okay, so we're ready to do that then.
So, ta-da. There's Johanna. So you can call her. She assists parents with understanding their rights and connect. So this is one thing that we always do at DPI. If you contact the parent liaison or a dispute resolution consultant or any other consultant within our office, we always inform the EC director of a parent calling, because it is our belief that it is important that school districts, EC directors know about concerns a parent has about their child in their districts, so that they get the opportunity to work through that at the local level. So we always inform them. Also, we inform parents of their resources and provide guidance on how to handle specific special ed situations. And this would be a prime example of that. Dispute resolution consultants do the same. They also assist in answering questions regarding policies, procedures, processes, both federal and state. And again, we communicate concerns with the EC director and provide guidance on how to resolve the issues. And so our next part of this would be to explain some of those processes we offer through the state. One is informal and the other are required formal processes. And our information is on the website, and I have that link. Does anybody have any questions about either of those positions? We have at this time 4 dispute resolution consultants, and we have Johanna. We will be getting a 5th dispute resolution consultant within the next couple of months. And
We
our
have-
dispute resolution consultants are the ones who investigate state complaints as well.
We had a question about whether Johanna's available to the whole state, and I just typed a quick answer and said, yes, of course. It's Department of Public Instruction is responsible to serve all of North Carolina.
Mhm.
Right, you ready?
And all dispute resolution consultants are statewide as well. So you can call any of them. Okay.
This is so inconsistent, it's driving me nuts. Here we go. Not just talking about changing the slides, nothing, that's all.
I was like, wow.
What else is doing
Good,
great?
Karen. So I'm sorry, Karen.
Amy, fire me right on the spot.
I'll do better.
Sorry about that.
So one process we offer as a state, which is not a requirement of the IDEA, but we do offer a facilitation program called Facilitated IEP Meetings. It's an informal process that utilizes an impartial facilitator. And what the impartial facilitator does, it guides the process of the meeting and assist IEP teams in communicating effectively. The IEP is developed by a collaborative team who requires members share responsibility of the process, content, and the results. If you can go to the next slide.
If I can, I'll try.
And
Yeah.
Lee, I was going to ask, facilitated IEP meetings, my experience to the ones I've been to, the families have typically been told maybe to set aside 4 to 6 hours for those. Is
Yes.
that kind of the norm? They typically
Yes.
those are the ones where we usually do see them last a little bit longer.
They do, and that can be for reviewing and revising an IEP, development of you're reviewing an annual IEP, because you have a third party kind of guiding that process. So there is more involved in it. But yes, those are usually longer. So you think about, when would you ask for a facilitated IEP? And normally that's when the IEP team gets stuck and can't get through the process. So you might get to the place of, we're at the place of service delivery and the team just cannot agree. And so, you've been in the meeting for 3 hours, people are exhausted, tension, emotions are high. And so the team says, we're just can't go any further and decide we're going to end this meeting. We're going to request a facilitator. The facilitator is able to bring in is objective. They are not there to make decisions. They are not there to tell the team what to do and how to proceed. They are there to help stay focused on the child and get through the process, and they use their skill set in doing so. Parents want to ensure that they are given the opportunity to participate. Sometimes parents feel like their voices aren't heard. And so a facilitated IEP meeting is a great resource to feel like, you are being heard in that meeting. When communication is tense and the relationships are strained, we see great results from facilitated IEP meetings. It's a place where everybody can have their voice, heard and input given into the process.
Couple of questions at this point.
Can we keep going though? Because we're not done
going
with the
first.
facilitated slides yet.
Sorry, yeah. There you go. Oh, yeah, good stuff.
So this is the role of the facilitator. They'll plan and design the meeting in partnership with the parties. That means they'll contact the parent and normally the EC director and even possibly the case manager or LEA rep. They always set a positive and welcoming tone. They clarify the purpose and they set ground rules, the desired outcomes, and the role of each person. And I kind of want to talk about this little blurb really quick, because I think this is something that everybody could do with even out a facilitator. If we think about it, it's important, we have our required IEP members, right? As a parent, you're there. But what's your purpose of being there? Yes, as a parent, but what are you bringing to the table? You're bringing to the table the perspective of your child in the home environment. You're bringing the perspective of, here's what's going on, just to let you know what's going on in the home. Or my child, you may want to share, he's in therapy 3 days a week because he's had to deal with, family loss. That's something you might want to bring. You're bringing that perspective. The general ed teacher, what are they bringing? They're bringing the perspective of how the child is doing in the general ed environment. So it's important to remember the role of each person, not just their title. Also, it's important to have some ground rules, giving everybody time to speak. Everybody is going to be respectful of whoever is speaking, and we're going to not, be personal about other, how we feel the teacher's doing or how we feel the parents doing or not doing. And those kind of things can really be done even without a facilitator. So that's just something to think about. Always the discussions are focused on the student, not on how the teacher is and is not doing, or how the parent is and is not doing. And I think that's one thing the facilitators do a great job of and really helps getting through that process. It draws out the opinions and encourages full participation from everybody. And they're able to really monitor that pace and get to the end result, really get to the outcomes. Everybody may not agree with the outcome, but the team is able to achieve the goal. And they mean that neutrality. They are not weighing in on the decisions, but they are trying to help the team move forward so the team can achieve the outcome of the meeting. I believe there may be one more. And here's the bit, I think I talked a little bit about this. Focus stays on the child and the student. The IEP team maintains control of the decisions. It's not the facilitator. It really assists in maintaining or rebuilding those relationships. Again, I talked about that at the beginning. It's really important for those relationships to either maintain or rebuild throughout this process. And the process of facilitation is at no cost to either party. I don't believe I have this in here, but it is a mutually agreed upon process. So either party can say, I don't want to participate. And so therefore a facilitator would not be assigned. It's optional. It's an optional process to either party to request, and either party can say, I don't want to participate. So, okay, so the questions.
You just answered one of them, which is, could a professional request a facilitated IEP meeting? And you just said yes, either the parent or school staff
Mhm.
could start the process of asking for a facilitator. So that was covered. Let me see the other two. If you don't feel like relationships with the team are strained, but you feel like you're facilitating the meeting sometimes, and you just want to be able to participate as a parent, would it break down relationships to ask for a facilitator? Or does it come across to the school as kind of neutral?
I mean, I don't think it breaks down the relationship if you ask for a facilitator. I mean, I think asking for a facilitator shows your willingness to, I mean, your desire to be part of the process and not be the one like, I think sometimes parents may feel that way, and if that's your perspective and how you're feeling, you absolutely have a right. And I mean, if you feel like you have a great relationship, good relationship working with your IEP team, there would be nothing wrong with discussing it and saying, I would really like a facilitator because I'm sometimes feeling like I'm kind of facilitating the meeting. I really like just to kind of be a participant. And I would assume that your relationship being intact, that would be welcoming.
And just to get clarification, if the school or parent says they do not want to participate in a facilitated meeting, does that then mean that a facilitator is not assigned?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the way the process works is one party submits the request for facilitation. We receive it. Ms. King is our facilitation coordinator. And then she contacts the other party. If the other party says no, then the one who requested is informed that the other party has declined facilitation. And the team still moves forward with facilitation. I mean, not facilitate, still moves forward with the IEP meeting, just without a facilitator.
Or the parent has options of the other approaches that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, they can have an option of requesting mediation or other options to deal with a dispute, but I mean, we won't assign a facilitator if both parties do not agree.
We have a question in Spanish.
Yeah, and Karen, I believe that first question up there, how do you decide which to call, was in reference
Trying
to,
to wait for the right time for that.
well, it was first, so
little out of
I'm going to
sync.
take it now. I think the question was, how do we know whether to call the parent liaison or
Yes.
dispute resolution
Right.
You
consultant?
can call, I mean, that's a great question. I think, if you're looking at more of, I have a dispute and I'm considering, if you're thinking about, I have a dispute and I'm thinking I want to file a state complaint, or you have policy questions or questions about federal, like IDEA, you may call a dispute resolution consultant. But either way, you can call either party. If like one of the parties, I mean, we have such a small group and we all work, I mean, we're talking all day. If one person can't answer the question, we will get you in contact with another. So it's okay to call either. But if it's more of a like policy question or dispute, like I'm looking into filing a state complaint because of they violated my rights or my kids' rights, or that kind of level, use probably a dispute resolution consultant. But again, you can call Johanna, and if she feels not comfortable answering that question, she'll ask us. If you called us about something we didn't feel comfortable and we felt like, Johanna, I keep saying we because I was a dispute resolution consultant, so excuse me for that. We would ask her. So you can call either. It would be fine.
All right. Can we get some help from one of our interpreters for a question in Spanish, please?
Yes, Angie or Felipe, I don't know if one of you can translate that question for us so we can answer it. But they are both, I believe, on the Spanish channel, so we won't be able to hear.
Oh.
They'll need to either translate it in the chat or come off onto the English channel so we can hear what the question is.
So we can't do that right now then, I guess.
Well, Felipe is saying, please go to the English channel, which is where we are.
I'm sorry, I'm here now. I can support
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
Let
The first
me
one,
just look at the
please.
question real quick. Yep. Oh, there's two of them. Okay,
Well,
give me
I-
one
I-
second.
Just the top one.
Got it. So I have this one in Spanish and it says, hello, my son is in kindergarten. He is 5 years old and the school told me that he is not learning anything, that he should go to a school where he can be, hold on a second. Where he can get more care. And he has autism. So I want to know if the special school that the teachers say that he needs is the same, equal kind of school as a school that he's currently supposed to be going to. Because it's going to be a school where he's never going to graduate. So that was the question.
So that's specific to his child. And so that question we would need to talk a little bit further with him or her about that, because we would need more information. So, Amy, do y'all have an interpreter that maybe we could help?
Yeah.
Like set
Yes,
up a
I'm
call
going
with?
to Angie, if you can let them know that I'm going to put Millie Ramos' email address in the chat. She's one of she's our lead bilingual parent educator, and she can assist this family and provide them the information they need in Spanish.
That's good. All right, the next question actually leads us to our next topic, I believe, because it's a question about the difference
Okay, if we
between.
can leave that question there, we will answer it after we talk about mediation. I think that there's only
That's
one
what
or
I was
two
gonna
slides
say.
about that.
Just like a little well-timed segue question.
Great.
Because let me double check, but I don't, right. So we don't have other questions on facilitated ID. Okay, so we'll move ahead then.
Okay. So the next process is mediation, and mediation is a formal process. The reason it is formal, it is a requirement of states to provide. It's in the IDEA. Mediation, it's a formal meeting of parents and school representatives led by a neutral party, the mediator, who is a trained mediator. They help parents and school systems resolve disagreements concerning special education issues. They can help parties reach agreements which are legally binding about specific issues, as well as build a better working relationship for the future. Mediation can help resolve differences between parent and schools efficiently and effectively. So I think there's one more slide about that. So here's a little bit more about mediation. It's voluntary, private, mutually agreed upon both parties, and confidential. So it too is a mutually agreed upon process. So that is the same thing as facilitation. Both parties must agree. The process where both the parent and the school have control and ownership over the settlement, which means both parties have to agree on what the agreement says. So if one party says, I want this, the parent says no, then you don't have to sign the agreement. Nothing is decided unless the parties agree to it, which is a mediation agreement. The mediation does not occur through an IEP process. So that's the difference. Facilitated IEP is an IEP meeting. Mediation is done outside of the IEP process. It's normally the parents and someone from the school system, normally the EC director. Attorneys might be involved. You may have a principal. I'm not sure if schools involve teachers. There may be, may not, just depends on what you are mediating. But again, the differences are that facilitated IEP is an IEP meeting, mediation is not. Also, mediation is a requirement of the IDEA, facilitation is not. Mediation is settled through an agreement. Facilitated IEP is not an agreement. It's whatever is decided through the IEP process. What is similar is they're both mutually agreed upon. Does anybody have questions about mediation? And does that answer the question about the differences? Would mediation be appropriate for an IEP team where the child is in DSS custody whose parents have lost their rights? What are you going to mediate? I don't know. More appropriate for an IEP team.
I wonder if they're asking about who represents the issue of a surrogate parent getting involved as an educational decision maker. Maybe we could get a little more information on the question, because I think what Lee is saying is the mediation, the guess about the surrogate question. Where do you want to talk about the surrogate parent now, Lee, or is there a
No,
time?
I can, let me just get through this next question. Should you
Okay.
try facilitated IEP? That's a good question. Before mediation, and if it fails to resolve the issue, do me, or are they sort of equal options? They're different. So that's a good question though. So, you know, facilitated IEP is if you have had your you may want to try a facilitated IEP meeting if you are in an IEP meeting and you just can't get through the process, or you've gotten through the process. If you've got, if the team is not willing to go back through the IEP process to try to address the things that you disagree with, that's when you're going to mediation. But if they're willing to go back to a facilitated IEP meeting, the LEA rep says, okay, let's go back. Let's listen to the parents' concerns. They're willing to go back to go through the process. And that's what you want to do. It's when, there's just that disagreement and it's like, we have addressed your concerns. We don't agree. Here's your prior written notice. We've acknowledged your disagreement with the team's decision. Here are your rights. You may want to request mediation. There's not one doesn't have to come before the other. But we would always encourage facilitated IEP meeting if everybody's in agreement to try to resolve anything there's a disagreement within the IEP or evaluations. You can do an reeval through a facilitation to try to resolve those issues. But again, mediation is an option.
I think there's times too when maybe an IEP meeting in the past was kind of rough.
Yeah.
And you could request the facility IEP meeting the next time in hopes that communication and things will go better. So sometimes it could be viewed as preventive.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I mean, it is a very collaborative process. And so it's always, we would always encourage parties to, engage in facilitated IEP if you feel like that your relationship, you can get back to the table and try to resolve those issues through that process. You do not have to have a lawyer. It's just sometimes lawyers are involved, but they do not have to be. It was just sometimes they're involved in mediation.
All right. Do you want to do the surrogate parent question or?
I don't know what the
Got it.
surrogate parent is. I still don't. Would mediation be more appropriate for an IEP meeting where there is a a child is in DSS custody whose parents have lost their rights? I still don't know what why you would, what are you mediating?
I can use chat to address that.
Yeah.
Heather? Okay.
Well,
I just
and
need
I
to know,
think
I just need to know what would they be mediating?
for folks that maybe are not aware, when both parents have lost their educational rights, because there are some parents that still retain them, even if they're incarcerated or whatnot.
Mhm.
When there's no buddy that the school can find that meets the IDA's criteria for a parent, a surrogate parent
Right.
can be
Mhm.
assigned.
Yeah.
But the situation for mediation would be no different in that situation than any situation. So it wouldn't be a necessary just because this is a child that has a surrogate parent in their life. The mediation would be appropriate if they've gotten to a point where they need some kind of confidential time to meet and work things out and agree. Just like facilitation would be available to them, all of their options would be available. But I wouldn't say just because of that. And mediation certainly would not get those parents invited to the table if they truly have lost their educational rights. They would not be part of
Right.
that.
If a parent has lost their parental rights, then, I mean, that's a whole nother probably webinar, but they would have a surrogate parent. So they would have that surrogate parent serves as their parent, not DSS. DSS can never serve as that parent.
That's actually going to be 5 webinars, folks. So there's going to be a series of ECAC webinars directed to foster parents, surrogate parents, to talk about the specifics related to those complicated situations. So
Mhm.
you'll be hearing more about that on our mailing list. I think we're ready to. Well,
We have a
maybe
question,
one
We have
more
a question in Spanish.
in Spanish.
it's one.
Angie, hoping you can hop on and translate that question for us. Lee,
Sure.
I have a question before Angie goes. All right, let's say that you have a family, they've gone through mediation and they've now come to some confidential agreement.
Mhm.
But the agreement is not being carried out. Then what? Who after they, they come together and say, all right, here's what we're going to do to remedy this, but then the remedy isn't carried out. What is the option after that? Or who is DPI coming in to monitor to say, y'all agreed on this needs to be happening, or then what?
Is it a mediation agreement?
Yes.
So they can file, they would have to file. It's not a state complaint, but they can file in court against that. I'm gonna have to look it up. But what I would recommend is that they would contact the EC director about that. I mean, the question is why are they not implementing the mediation agreement. And here's one thing that we would caution parents in school districts would be in mediation agreements, you're mediating special education issues, right? That's where we provide a mediator, special education issues. Because what we have seen is there's all kinds of things that are in these agreements that are not, sometimes they're not special ed, but that's what we provide a mediator for, is special education disagreements.
Thanks, Lee. Go ahead, Angie. Sorry I interrupted you.
Where is it?
No worries. 1 second, please.
One.
So the question says, if you do not want to sign the ITP papers because they're not complying with the requirements and they demand that you sign them anyways, what can you do if they are basically requesting that you sign? I'm not sure if ITP, maybe it's IEP, I'm not sure. But yes, what to do if they're asking you to sign, but you're not in agreement with that?
You don't have to sign an IEP. Signature alone doesn't mean you're in agreement. It means you're in attendance, but you don't have to sign.
Right. Parents, there are some states where signing the IEP means, if you don't sign it, it means they can't do it. In North Carolina, signing the IEP just means that you participated. Doesn't mean you love everything in it. Doesn't mean that the world's full of Skittles and rainbows and everybody's happy. That signature on the IEP just shows that you were part of the process and participated. What folks can't do is they can't evaluate your child without your signature, and they can't, you have to give that initial consent for services. So you have to give your permission for that. Those are the things, if you don't sign, that they can't move forward with.
And I mean, even though there are signatures for prior written notice and there's signatures for IEPs, you're not required to sign them. Even if asked, you don't have to.
I don't see any other questions, so we'll go ahead and move along.
I'm
Appreciate
sorry,
everybody's involvement.
I'm looking to answer, I'm looking at my policies to answer that last question, but I'm going to move on and then I'm going to find it. Okay, state complaints. This is another option and a formal process. If you have a disagreement, that you can file a formal state complaint with our office. We investigate alleged violations of special ed law and policies, the IDEA and North Carolina policies. We cover a 1-year period from the date the complaint is filed. It has to be determined sufficient, and what's sufficient is it's an alleged violation of special education issue. So we, if it's found non-compliant, we issue corrective action. You can go to the next slide. So again, we talked about the alleged violations. What we do not investigate is like personnel issues, and that's not licensure. We do investigate EC licensure issues. Personnel is like allegations of misconduct. We don't investigate general education issues such as grades, like retention or promotion. Those are not within our purview to investigate, or other non-special education issues. What we can investigate are stuff like student is not receiving the services that are outlined on the IEP as it's written, disciplinary issues, like they didn't conduct an MDR on the child's been out for 15 days, suspended, didn't conduct an MDR, special education teacher certification. Our timeline from filing a complaint is 60 days from the date the complaint is found sufficient, the report is issued. And so when we say that, the date it's found sufficient is the date we receive it. So the date we receive it, it has to be a business day. So a business day is 8 to 5. on Monday through Friday unless it's a holiday. So if we received a complaint today at 4:59, that's the date we received sufficient. It's determined sufficient. The 60 days started today. School systems turn in documents 15 days after receiving the intake letter we issue. And if you were to file a complaint, you would get an intake letter. We identify the issues we're going to investigate and what documents we need. And then again, corrective action timelines, if it's non-compliant, they vary, such as trainings may be due at a certain time, compensatory education services. We may require IEP meetings. We may require specific evaluations. We may require a school district to put a monitoring system in place for meeting 90-day timelines or meeting reevaluation timelines, depending on the issue and the complaint. Does
All right.
anybody have any
We have-
questions about the state complaint process?
And Angie or Felipe, we have a question in Spanish whenever you're ready. And while we do that, Lee, you can tell us if this is the appropriate time for this one. This
Yes.
thing I was wondering too, who does handle personnel issues? Because when the school doesn't, you've mentioned a couple of times at least what is not appropriate for personnel issues.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of what is, and then if this, and I guess just as a parent educator, what goes in my mind, and the people can add detail if they'd like, is a teacher and a student are not a good fit. A teacher's unkind to a student repeatedly. Teacher's not getting this, kind of connecting with the student in a way that allows the student to benefit from their special education. There might be other things on other people's minds, but that's the thing I hear about the most. So what are some processes that are available for dealing with things like that?
If a parent files a complaint with us that would have that type of issue, we would direct them back to the local school district. And we would tell them to direct their concerns to either the school principal, because that sounds like a teacher assignment issue, which you just described, or to the EC director if they have done some type of, especially if it's like a regional program type of issue, to the EC director. Also, if it's a personnel issue, as in they feel like the teacher has mistreated the child, there is a grievance process. Each school district has a formal grievance process in their school board policies. We will direct them to file a grievance with their school district. If they feel like they allege some type of criminal act, we direct them to the police department.
Yeah.
We just can't, the only real personnel issue we can look at is around EC licensure issues, or if a child has a one-on-one assistance on their IEP and the child does not, the complaint says they are not been provided a one-on-one assistant, or if there's specific training that's in their IEP for a specific staff member, something along those lines. But as for like an HR issue, we can't investigate. We don't have the authority.
Okay.
And Karen, I was going to add something to that, because that is something that we do hear a lot here at ECAC. And sometimes it is, let's just face it, guys, sometimes in life, sometimes it's just not a good fit, right? We have that in all different scenarios. And so sometimes it's like, man, we're just not a good fit for each other. But sometimes it is the personnel issue is that the parent feels like that person doesn't have the training that they need to serve their child. And that is something that can happen during the IEP process. There is a question that asks about, are there staff that might need some technical assistance or training to support this child in their least restrictive environment. So there is a place for those conversations, and have them respectfully. we've had that where we've said, I'm concerned that the teacher might need more support in, serving my student, and maybe some training in this picture exchange communication system or whatever it might be. So those types of things. But a lot of times folks want to have their IEP written to say, Joey is only going to see Lee. Lee is the only person. And those IEPs are never intended to be specific, because people go on leave, or they quit and they go into another field, or they move
Right.
away. So, those kinds of things, those are the conversations we have with folks. But principals have a lot of power in their school building. I have a lot of authority. And so personnel issues, we typically tell folks, have a heart-to-heart with the principal and see where that leads, sort of a thing. So that was my 2
All right.
cents.
Angie, are you here for Spanish question?
I am. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay,
Just
here
takes
you
me a
are.
second to find the mute.
Sure,
I
sure.
apologize.
That's
Yes,
all right.
the question is as follows. It says, I have already filed a complaint with the school, and I have also filed a complaint with the state. I am waiting now to hear a response from them. How can I contact Johanna to see if she can help me?
Can you, Angie, ask for that person's name and send it to us privately and ask when they filed the complaint and how they filed it? Did they mail it? Did they email it? And then can you give them Johanna's email address?
Are those
'Cause
coming on your last slide, Lee? Are you giving specific email addresses on the last?
Yeah, but if this person has filed a complaint, we need to know it now.
Got it.
Like, I need to make sure that we address this.
Okay, got it. All right,
Just because I just need to know how it came in.
okay. All
Okay,
right.
I'm sure she got that through translation, but I'll go ahead and just repeat it briefly here in Spanish to
Okay,
make
thank
sure.
you.
Entonces, a la señora que hizo la pregunta o el señor que hizo la pregunta anónima por el chat, por favor, mándenle un mensaje privado a algunas de las compañeras que están aquí presentes con su información, por favor, para poder ponerlas en contacto. Muchas gracias. I'm not sure if she has a way to send you private messages. That's the only thing through
Okay.
this webinar. So we'll see if that works or not. Thank
Okay.
you.
We are going to, maybe you could announce this too, Angie. We will send a follow-up webinar where people will actually have a copy of this presentation and the contact information and some supporting documents to go along with all this content. So we will make a point of getting that translated into Spanish and sent out sometime during this week, or hopefully first part of the week even. Okay.
So when you
And Johanna, I don't know what DPI has on staff as far as Spanish interpretation, or if you utilize a language access line, but if not, and if the parent's willing, it could be something that we could have one of our bilingual parent educators support that conversation.
Excellent, because my question tomorrow to Lee was going to be, how do I access interpreters? So thank you.
Okay. All right, we got a couple
I just want to
more.
get through these questions. We've only got about 20 minutes.
Yeah, we've got a couple more here. When you issue a state complaint, do you write it as a parent or do you have to get a lawyer?
No, you do not have to get a lawyer. We provide a form. It's on our website, but you don't have to use the form, but the form does provide all the required components that are identified by an asterisk. You don't have to use it. I mean, you could have a lawyer write it, but a lawyer does not have to write it. You can absolutely write it as a parent. It provides all the information you need, it's like a template. You just fill it in and you send it. We provide an email address you can send it to. If you can't download and fill it in, you can use the email address and basically write us an email with all the required components.
Pretty straightforward, really.
Pardon me?
It's pretty straightforward.
It's pretty straightforward, yeah.
Yeah, it's surprisingly, I think probably for some folks, if you haven't looked at the information before. Here's another one. If a school did not provide intervention that was supposed to be delivered as part of the MTSS process, separate from services delivered in the IEP. Is that something that could warrant a complaint?
So, the multi-tiered system of support process that's outside of it is a general ed process. So we would not investigate that unless, so I'd say this with a caveat, that there is progress monitoring data that is required in some certain for evaluation purposes. So if it was part of an evaluation, we would investigate that. But if you're looking at it through your child may be in this process and was supposed to be getting interventions and didn't, but that is outside of a special ed process, such as evaluations or reeval, we would not be able to investigate that.
Thank you. And we
Yeah,
have,
that question there in Spanish, Angie has translated
was-
it already. It said, I filed a complaint today with the school district and made a written complaint to take to SSI. So there might be two separate things going on, but it sounds
Okay.
like the complaint was just filed today.
okay,
If you want to
Okay.
give her an idea on timeline.
all right.
Well, if it was filed with the school district, then I would, the school district would need to address that. But if they filed it with DPI, we would need to have received it, and then from the date we receive it, we have 60 days to like if it was sufficient, we would have 60 days to respond from the date we received it.
All right, got one more big topic, so we'll go ahead to this one.
Okay. And that is due process, and that this is another formal process, and this is where you can file a due process petition. Parents of a child, an adult child, or a district may file a due process petition. These disputes that involve identification, evaluation, educational placement, free appropriate public education, or manifestation determination, discipline issues. This process requires the parties to try to resolve the issues through a resolution meeting or mediation, and you must file your petition within 1 calendar year of the dispute activity. A due process petition is filed with the Office of Administrative Hearings. What I will say, if you are a parent and you file a due process petition, a school district will involve their attorneys, and the attorneys are the ones who will lead the district through this process. You do not have to have an attorney, but the school district will have an attorney. So it is heard, if you get to the hearing, it is heard from an administrative law judge is the one who oversees the hearing. And DPI is not involved necessarily in the hearing process. Does anybody have any questions about that process?
Got at least one here. Okay, that is not about due process. It might be something we want to get to, but it's not strictly a due process.
Okay.
I have a question because I haven't seen that. I knew that a resolution meeting or mediation was an option, but it's a requirement to agree to that, or
You have to try, you can
that
waive
you
your
do
right
have-
to resolution and go to mediation. You have to make those attempts to try to resolve it, because the office, they always want to try to allow the parties to resolve it before going to a hearing, which is pretty, it involves a lot of time. It is, it's very intensive on all the parties involved.
So then would you be in some ways better to just try mediation before you were to go to due process?
I mean, you always can, of course you can.
You're gonna
Usually when
end
you're
up-
at the part of due process, you may have exhausted, or maybe the parent has not. But I would encourage parents to try to resolve their disputes through the other means before getting to this part, to this process. However, as a parent, you always have a right to file a due process petition. Again, it's quite lengthy. It involves a judge. It usually does involve attorneys. Some parents do it without attorneys. So I would highly encourage parents to use other processes before coming here. But again, they always have a right to file if they choose to do so.
I recently attended a webinar by Cadre, the Center for Appropriate Dispute Resolution in Education. They provide a lot of good technical assistance around dispute resolution, especially in special education. And there was a couple bigwig attorneys doing that presentation. It was very interesting because the stats are that due process has one of the lowest satisfaction rates.
Hmm.
If the
Hmm.
parents win, they're still dissatisfied, or the school district wins. No, it's like there's no winners, kind of a thing that folks are often, and it certainly is an option, and we make folks aware of all their options. But it seems to be the one that takes the biggest toll on folks. Whereas facilitation, even though not every state offers it, North Carolina, we're lucky that we have that informal option, yields one of the highest satisfaction rates from on all sides. Not that we like to think of people taking sides, but I'm just throwing that out there for folks. But I see we do have some more questions.
Yeah, this one is a little bit more about due process. If one party requested mediation and the other party didn't agree, so there was no mediation, would the next step be due process?
You have to file a due process petition. So if you as a parent want to file so you don't have to go, so there's not one step before another. These are all independent of each other. So, but part of the due process system is you must, go to a resolution meeting, or the parties can waive resolution and go to mediation. And what mediation is, a mediator can be assigned. The parties either have to do resolution or waive it and go to mediation. So, but again, these processes are independent of each other. Does that make sense?
I was wondering if, and I don't know the exact intent of the question, but I was wondering if
I don't know if that
if-
was the end,
right, but I'm wondering if the thought pattern might be, if they won't agree to mediation, do I have to force mediation by going to due process if I really think we need mediation?
well, I guess you could do, I guess,
that
but
be
I
logical?
would
But-
not. Ooh,
And that again, that is the thinking.
oh, yes, Karen summarized my thoughts. Ooh. So here, is this the same about, can you recommend, maybe that's different.
No, that's the next thing we're gonna do.
Okay, I was like,
They're separate.
so classroom assignment is a local decision, and it is not it's not an IEP team decision.
Okay, let me
If
back
I'm
up just a
understanding
quick
that correct.
second and say this is a different question. So
Okay, so it's not the same.
the
Okay.
strategy about mediation, and we'll shift from that to this question because our
Okay.
time's getting a little tight. Can you recommend on how to handle a disagreement with the school IEP team about the upcoming year's classroom assignment? And
Oh,
I'm gonna also suppose, and the person can jump in here, that they're talking maybe more about placement, which
okay.
is,
Mhm.
the level of supports and the whether it's a separate setting, maybe, or things like that.
Oh, okay, I see.
As opposed to a teacher, because we've already said repeatedly that teacher assignment, teacher issues are not typically IEP team issues. But if I'm not right, and the person wants to jump in, they could clarify. So if it is about placement, where the child will be learning, how much time away from children without disabilities would that be? If there's a disagreement around that, Would a facilitated meeting or a mediation session be better?
Well, it is now February 19th. So I'm wondering if this is about placement. It's February 19th. So I'm wondering why y'all are having those discussions so early, that I would try to discuss, can we have that discussion when we've collected more data towards the end of the school year, and do that through a facilitated IEP meeting?
If it is about placement, we got that. And if you're thinking also maybe it's about next year. We know
We're
that
talking
these
about
things
the
come out,
upcoming year, like
out throughout the year
2024,
too.
2025, is I would want to probably ask for a meeting, possibly April or May,
Transition meeting.
for
Mhm.
more data to be collected through a facilitated IEP meeting, to have a facilitated IEP meeting, because it does seem a little early to be talking about placement for
Yeah.
2024, 2025 school year, if the
Good
school
point.
year starts in like end of August or September. If that's just my assumption. I may be reading that incorrectly.
It also occurs to me, just from, taking the calls over the years, that if there's this much advance notice, the school-based team might be expecting that the parent might not like that. So
Mhm.
another thought a parent could do would be to hold some form of a meeting, and maybe with a facilitator, to talk about, well, school's not over yet. What can we do between now and the end of this school year? Can we try some adjustments to special
Mhm.
education services that might work better, and see if we can make this setting work? So you always have IEP IEP teams, can make really important decisions most times of the school year. There's not, I wouldn't give up on this year yet, as far as
No,
maybe moving the needle and then see what the data
that's
says,
right.
like Lee said. All right, well, what else? We
So
have,
can I get back to the question? Because I want to go back to who
yes.
enforces mediation agreements. So,
Oh, okay,
because I kind of danced around that and I
okay,
stumbled over it because I wanted to make
you were
sure.
thinking.
Yeah, I don't like when I answer a question like that. So back to that question, that so if you go into mediation and you have a legally binding agreement, and the school district,
Oh,
if the school district decides for some reason they are not implementing the mediation agreement, which is the special ed parts of that, that I can speak to that part around the special ed parts of that. And you've gone, you've done your due diligence of trying to address that. Not that you have to, but that's would be best practice on a parent's part, to go through that chain of command and really talk through that. It is enforceable. You can go to the state court, or you can go through any state court or in a district court of the United States to have it enforced.
thank you. We have one more question, but before we shift to that, I'd like to thank Lee and Johanna
Oh,
for
hi,
joining
Faith.
us for the evening here. I'd like to thank everyone who's present and all the people who made it possible for you to be here, because it's not always easy to get freed up for 90 minutes in the evening. I need to show a poll. I need, as a federally funded agency, we
Karen,
need to collect data.
there's a
Yeah,
couple
there's
more
two.
questions.
I know. I got to do this
Okay.
though.
Okay, go
My
ahead.
executive director's sitting right here. I got to do this poll.
Okay.
I'm
Do I
flexible,
need,
I'm flexible.
do I need to take this presentation down to run the poll, Amy? Because I don't see any.
No, and I can
For
launch
a
the poll,
poll.
so
Okay.
we're gonna let you answer these questions.
Yeah, we're
Essentially,
gonna keep going, but
folks,
we'll pop the poll up. I hope that
yeah,
people
I'll
can
pop the poll up,
attest.
so Lee will
that
be talking and answering the questions.
We're already losing people, so I don't want to wait too much longer. So Amy will do the poll, and we will answer the question, ultimately, who gets to decide placement? Who's the last authority? Which speaks to, how do IEP teams make decisions, which is a huge question.
So, it's the IEP team goes through the process, the placement decision, it's the IEP team If there is disagreement within the IEP team, the LEA rep is the person who makes the final decision if there's disagreement. And that should be documented, well documented in a prior written notice. The parent should be given the prior written notice within a reasonable time so that before that decision is implemented, so that you as a parent have time to review that decision. You may want to say, hey team, I'd like to get back together to discuss this. So, or, okay, I'm going to request mediation before this decision is implemented.
Or even, we'd like to get back together, but in the meantime, I will have checked with the EC director, going back to some of your other.
Yeah, just like you're
Yes.
that's the whole thing with a
Yeah.
written notice.
Yeah.
If there are people from school districts on here, that's one thing I encourage you to train your staff is to give enough time, especially when they are, there's going to maybe disagreement or there is disagreement. That's why it's important to have IEP meetings ahead of time to give that time for those prior written notices to be issued and that parent to be given time to really digest what's in the prior written notice and to invoke their rights as a parent if there is disagreement before those decisions are implemented. That's my last.
Thank you very
and
much.
Faith,
This is our last slide with
Yeah.
resources, contact things.
and that's our contact information on that
Yeah.
one link.
And our website's here too at ECAC. We are going to send this presentation in a PDF version, so you won't be able to click links, but you'll be able to see the information. I will put some more links and information in a follow-up email to all of you who attended tonight as well. And we have one more sort of fun question. I think we could turn off the recording, Amy. Somebody would like to know what your new job is, Lee, and how it's different.
Oh,
than
hey,
the previous
Faith.
one.
I am the section chief of PMA, so I'm in Carol Ann's old position. So I am like the supervisor of policy monitoring and audit. So it's the dispute resolution team and monitoring team. So that's who's under PMA.
Both of those.
So I've moved on up, Faith.
Yeah, moving on up. Well,
For
congratulations.
10 years.
All right,
I
well, thank
still
you
see myself
again.
as a dispute resolution consultant, clearly, because I keep referring to myself.
As
as
we- yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, thank you, everybody, for your participation, for being here, for the advocacy that you're doing for kids with disabilities. Thank you, Amy and Lee and Johanna, and we're going to sign off for the evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
One more thing, guys,
more
before folks go, I just want to remind folks, if you have a question that you didn't get answered or you really need some individual assistance finding your way, that's what we're here for at ECAC. So go ahead and give us a call. Everything that we do for families is at no cost, and we'll help you figure out action steps and your options. And now we have a newly appointed parent liaison at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction Office of Exceptional Children. She's now available to you, and the dispute resolution folks are always there, but it's hard stuff and it's hard to navigate. So please reach out so we can help. That's what we want to do. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank
Thanks,
you. We
everybody.
appreciate all you
Bye.
do at
Thanks,
ECAC.
everybody.